Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show, bringing another really awesome guest today, involved in creating a better tomorrow for many people out there. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Jerry McLaughlin, who is Chief Executive Officer and board member of Life Biosciences, which is a private biotech company. It's dedicated to developing novel therapies to extend healthy human lifespan, ultimately pursuing a really interesting platform approach to develop therapeutics that can prevent, treat, and or ultimately reverse multiple aging-related conditions. Jerry has over 30 years of experience in the biopharma industry, has been involved in discovery, clinical development, global commercialization of over a dozen FDA-approved drugs with multiple successful exits. Most recently, Jerry was the president and CEO for Neos Therapeutics, which is a commercial stage pharma company, and before that served as president and CEO of AgeneBio, a clinical stage, a private biopharma company there. They were developing therapies for neurologic and psychiatric diseases. Earlier, he held the role of senior vice president and chief commercial officer at NuPathe, which was acquired by Teva. And he began his career at Merck, was extensively involved in multiple blockbusters there. He holds a BA in economics from Dickinson College, MBA from Villanova School of Business, and we're honored to have him with us today. A lot of interesting themes to get into today. Jerry McLaughlin, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
No, Ira, I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been following your work, and so I'm excited about the conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've mentioned before the show, I've been following you. You've been involved in, so many interesting things the last 30 years, everything from, selling the blockbusters to sort of clinically developing semi-blockbuster products on through early development. Take us through a little bit of your early story, if you would, Jerry, because I think, you've done a bit of everything, and it'd be interesting to hear the background as we eventually get into longevity and what you're doing now.
Yeah, Ira, it's I'll try and be brief, but it's really been I think a very interesting path for myself, and I guess getting down to the core, I like to always be challenged, and I have a saying that I also pass on to folks that I mentor. In my career, whenever I've become comfortable, I get uncomfortable and look for another challenge. And the opportunity out of college to join Merck at a time when Merck was America's most admired company, I think 5 years running, was just an amazing opportunity. Some of the brightest and the best, most intelligent people I've ever worked with, tremendous science and making tremendous changes for patients in the world. If we didn't launch a new blockbuster, it was an unusual year. And early in your career, you become excited. That's what you expect.
Yep.
But I learned a lot there. One, about respecting science. I'm not a scientist, as you illustrated, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for science. And as a business person, more of a commercial background,
Yep.
I see myself as the steward of the science. And so I see it as a great partnership, and just been very fortunate in my career. So in those early days at Merck, we were very much an R&D focused company, and that permeated throughout the organization. It was the days of Roy Vagelos.
Yep.
And regardless if you were in R&D or if you were in marketing or market research, there was a high focus on the science. In fact, in market research, we could not rely on outside vendor reports, which you typically do. We were forced to request the data tables in a quantitative study and decipher and analyze the results and form our own publication. So if you go back in the Merck library, I probably have 25 publications.
Nice.
But it was a great foundation of, once again, respecting the science and understanding it, if not, being able to drive it from a scientific perspective. And during that time, I had this opportunity to be in a number of commercial roles. And as you mentioned, there was a product that at the time was called MK966 and ended up being Vioxx. Yep. And had the unique opportunity to be one of the first people in the marketing team, right, from the early days all the way through the U.S. commercialization in a highly competitive arena, competing against Pfizer, right, and one of the fastest launches that class in history. And so learned a lot about commercialization, competition, being a fast follower, right, those types of learnings. And then had the opportunity to repeat that from a new products planning perspective on a global basis at Merck. Moving to the corporate headquarters and basically planned on in a anti-infective space, a new generation carbapenem antibiotic, and as a follow-up to the famous what was called Invans, and following up to imipenem. And it was a really good lesson, once again, on the global commercialization aspects of our business. But it was along those times you sort of make a decision in your career. What do I want? And I sort of looked in the mirror 10, 11 years into the time at Merck. And I made a decision that, and I share this because if anybody's listening who's thinking about this, looking for more accountability and responsibility in my career. And that's when I searched for about a couple of years, and I landed on a company called Teva Pharmaceuticals that was young, profitable, but short on staff, basically about 125 employees, and joined there to expand my accountability and responsibility. And it was a tremendous, it's everything you think about and then some, right? At first, leaving a company like Merck with 100,000 employees can be quite scary at a young age. But quickly, I learned about myself. I thrived in that situation of challenge, being able to take on additional responsibility. And, Endo gave me all that and then some, right, to get involved in various aspects of the business, which was unknown at the time. I was just intellectually curious, but served well for the future. But after 6 years, we went from 125 employees to 1,300. And it was time to step back, and I had this inclination to see what the startup world looked like. And I had become friends and sort of provided advice to folks at Quaker Partners and venture capitalists. And after about a year or so, introduced me to a CEO, Jane Hollingsworth at NuPathe, a startup of about eight folks. And they were looking to bring on some commercial leadership early. And I was 39 years old, about to turn 40. My wife was pregnant with our third child and likely leaving the workforce. And in the field of dreams, Kevin Costner, I was turning 40 and I'd never done a crazy thing in my life. And I left a very comfortable situation, a highly profitable growing company, to take on the chief commercial officer role at NuPathe. And I think I cried again for about a month, and getting in and then realizing we had to go out and raise capital. And 2 weeks into the job, I was in front of NEA, my first venture pitch.
Been there.
And I think I've never been so scared in my life. But what I learned is, all of us have this ability to stretch ourselves, and we have more to offer than we actually give ourselves credit. And you learn how to be resilient and savvy. You lean on your network, and we had a great group of people there, right? And I really embraced the whole startup world and the network, right? What I found is, at first I felt very alone, but then very quickly you realize it's a very collegial environment, small biotech and pharma. And we built a great team, and I'll cut to the chase. 6 years later, we after taking the company public, raising a Series B, taking the company public, having a big setback with the FDA, raising more capital, growing the company, trimming it back, through all of that, we were able to then, in a competitive situation, we ended up being first acquired by Endo, and then Teva Pharmaceuticals came in with a topping offer.
Yep.
And I learned a lot there about resilience, about the power of an executive team, staying together and working as a team and believing in what you're offering. And we were able to generate a nice exit there. And then from there, really jumped into, I think, real small, took on my first CEO role with a 4-person company. And as you've mentioned earlier, AgeneBio, learned a lot about early stage development, discovery work, working with the NIH, and also working in a university spin out, right? So that was a nice challenge there for several years. And then 4 years later, I was approached about a turnaround opportunity for a publicly traded commercial stage company, Neos Therapeutics, and it brought me back to a little bit of the roots of commercial, because it's a commercial play, and went in and we had to restructure the company and raise additional capital. But it was a great story in terms of it and learning in making tough decisions and turning around a company. Which we did, I thought, very well until the pandemic hit. And then fortunately during that time we had prepared and we ended up having a nice exit for the company and for our shareholders late in 2020 into early 2021, which led me to Life Biosciences. And why Life Biosciences? It was the first when I was still actually employed, the day of the merger close for Neos, and I spoke to our chairman and chief, who at the time chief executive officer, Mahmood Khan, and then subsequently David Sinclair, one of our co-founders. And I harken back to my early days at Merck when I was in awe of the science and how we were helping patients. What dawned on me in this field of aging biology is that we look back and we were treating symptoms, at Merck. And it was fantastic, and we made a lot of difference. But 30 years later, the science had advanced to now where we can identify underlying drivers and causes of aging and subsequently age-related disease. We never really gave it much thought. We just assumed it was natural wear and tear. And so to me, this reminded me of where we were with Merck in the 80s and 90s, in the great age of discovery in cardiovascular, in autoimmune, in arthritis, and other, and lipids, and but here taking it to the next level and for the first time really targeting the underlying drivers of disease, of aging.
And everything you just mentioned, Jerry, obviously in a way sort of gets rolled up into one package now at Life Bio, because it's not a startup anymore, of course, but none of this private organization. You're doing development stage stuff. Clearly, a lot of the stuff in the pipeline is destined for blockbuster status one day. It's interesting because it was a couple of years ago now, there was the National Academy of Medicine Longevity Challenge was having, I think, one of their annual meetings, and Dr. Khan was presenting. I think it's probably about the time you joined, presenting on sort of Life Biosciences, which at the time he was sort of explaining they had a lot in the pipeline that, great. We might have, I don't know, something like 13 projects or something like that. Had to peel that back to something a little more manageable because, it's tough for a small company to develop 13 different drugs or platforms, whatever. Talk a little bit about the evolution of the company, because, you arrive and I think, you're instrumental in sort of peeling this back and sort of focusing on what we'll get into in terms of the key platforms you're working on now. But give a little bit of that background history on how the company has evolved a bit over the last couple of years.
Right, Ira. So my first message, it's evolved. There's probably been 3 chapters in the company. And what I say to the founders, we could not be here today if not for your dream. And there was a dream of the 2 co-founders, David Sinclair out of Harvard, which his science still is our core science leading us forward. But in addition to that, there was a gentleman, Tristan Edwards from Australia, and they had this idea: we can build a company in this health span aging biology space, and we could have a number of companies and bring the best and brightest scientists on board and give them the freedom to run their own entities within this holding company. And so you had subsidiaries, and it amassed up to 8. In addition, there were additional investments. And it's a great idea, and it brought together a tremendous amount of science. As you mentioned, Ira, over the long term, it can really put a strain on cash burn and focus. And so what my predecessor, Mahmood Khan, had started to do was to really challenge and go through a strategic review and started this, what we call shed and focus, right? So that process had started and prior to my joining, and when I came on board, so that would be chapter 2 with Mahmood. So there's the build, the dream. Then there's the identification of perhaps we need to trim and focus a little bit. And I think the third chapter with me coming on board, and then the executives that since we've hired that have a tremendous amount of biotech and pharma experience was to continue to focus, identify one particular strategy. In our case, cellular rejuvenation.
Yep.
Right. We focus on cellular rejuvenation, and that's where you give age cells more youthful characteristics. And we can get into that a little later, but that's what our focus. And then continue to shed any investments, any facilities, and in a business, any CEO or CFO who's listening will know it's if it's not providing return and your cost of capital is so high as a small biotech, you want to shed as much that's not driving value going forward. And during the time we came in, we conducted another strategic review. We made a decision. We trimmed from 3 platforms to 2. Once again, getting under the cellular rejuvenation.
Yep.
And then we put a relentless focus on, building value in a more traditional biotech sense, focusing on diseases where there is a clear regulatory pathway. There's a reasonable clinical development path, and then hiring, as I mentioned, the team with the experience to do that. And I think what happens sometimes in early stage biotech, and I think particularly in this health span space, there's a lot of what we call, my very technical term, shiny objects that can lead to distraction. Yep. And so we have taken more of the approach to be very focused, and we'll get into this, I think, a little later on why I think that's really important going forward to create value for patients, but also for the investors.
Let's segue from there, because clearly, you have. And a couple months ago, we hosted Ana Maria Cuervo, talking about her work at Albert Einstein in broadly autophagy, and the fact that all these nasty misfolded proteins that hang around, we don't want them, they cause problems. Right. She's based her career on this, and really sort of the leading expert. You have partnered with her, and clearly in sort of this cellular proteome rejuvenation, cellular rejuvenation aspect of her work, have targeted neurodegeneration, which is clearly a major unmet medical need. Talk a little bit about sort of the partnership with her group, and a little bit of how you're developing that part of the portfolio.
Yeah, so I'll talk about both of them, right? So we have our partnership with Ana Maria Cuervo at Albert Einstein. We also have a partnership with David Sinclair in Harvard. Yep. And those are our real drivers, right? Our partial epigenetic reprogramming platform with David. So I'll start with Ana Maria Cuervo and the chaperone-mediated autophagy. Ana Maria Cuervo, this is the beauty of the dream. And what David and Tristan Edwards, when they founded the company, was to partner with someone as talented and visionary as Ana Maria Cuervo. The concept that we can restore proteostasis, which means we can restore the ability of the body to recycle unwanted proteins into cellular nutrients, and just fascinating. It has broad application in neurodegeneration, and we have fantastic sort of proof of concept data in things like frontotemporal dementia. We have evidence in Alzheimer's. We have evidence in things like age-related macular degeneration, where all these accumulation of proteins form aggregates and toxicity levels that can drive disease. And so, working with Ana Maria has just been fantastic. We have a very strong relationship. We partner with her on a routine basis. She provides great scientific advice, her and her folks on our team, and then we translate that and sort of put it into our system of drug discovery and then drug development. And so it makes for a very good partnership, right? To allow her to run free with her brilliant mind and with her scientific discoveries. And then for us taking that discovery, taking that innovation, right, and translating into that to what are therapeutics that can be commercially viable.
Yep.
And so that's what's fantastic about that relationship. And in her case, these are small molecules that have the potential both in sort of an oral administration form or in the case of an eye disease, it may be a direct sort of intravitreal or subretinal injection into the eye. So we're real excited about where that program lies. It's in drug discovery today.
Okay.
But we've employed things like a high throughput screen now. And so we're making a lot of great progress. And that's where bringing the talent on to match, great collaboration. Once again, you have the academic side with Anna Maria, and then bringing someone like our chief scientific officer, Sharon Rosenzweig-Lipson, who has 25, 30 years experience from big pharma down to startups in terms of drug discovery and development. It's the perfect match.
Yep. And as you mentioned, the other core program, which is an extremely hot topic nowadays, partial epigenetic reprogramming, and we've touched on this topic a few times on the show over the last couple of years, but clearly, you've made a lot of headway in terms of the whole optic nerve regeneration and really I think sort of when one sits back and looks at epigenetic reprogramming, it looks like one of those holy grail technologies, but it's not one of those things that you can go holy grail right away. You have to really target, in your specific case, looking at the eye, looking at the optic nerve, and being able to target these factors for proper forms of rejuvenation. We don't want too much, we don't want too little. Talk a little bit about the collaboration with David Sinclair, and because this is core to the company as well.
That's right. So our partial epigenetic reprogramming is really born out of some initial work even prior to David with Shinya Yamanaka in Japan, yep. Won the Nobel Prize, right?
Yep.
Groundbreaking work that when he introduced 4 transcription factors, which, to keep it simple, OSKM,
yep.
was able to show could take aged and injured cells and reverse them all the way back to a pluripotent state. The problem with that is, it's amazing. Won Nobel Prize. The challenge is that the cell loses its identity, and so in very plain terms, it forgets what it is. It forgets if it's a retinal ganglion cell or if it's a kidney cell.
Right.
And so the issue with that is the cell then takes on a life of its own, right? And often can form teratomas and become cancerous.
Mm-hmm.
So you just don't have control over what it develops. What David's great contribution to the world and to the science and what is the basis of our intellectual property is that using 3 transcription factors, which are OSK, he can take these aged and injured cells, restore them, reverse them back to a younger state,
mm-hmm.
but not to a pluripotent state. And roughly it's an 80% reversal on average, right? Typically. And so what that means is, and why that's really important, is you get all the benefits of the rejuvenation of the cell, but the cell retains its identity.
Yeah.
And so all of these epigenetic marks that in the form of hypermethylation, right, that lead to DNA expression changes, you can reverse those and remove those through the use of these 3 transcription factors.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a phenomenal breakthrough. Right. And then what David did was then take that and examine in a number of disease states, but he started with the eye. It was a nice controlled area, right? There was history of gene therapy and success in this space. And David in multiple mouse studies was able to show restoration of vision, was able to make these mice younger, both in look and their function. He was able to regrow nerves, which was unheard of in an optic nerve crush model. So it really just set the world on a different path, which led to cover article in Nature and really turning the scientific world focusing. And many have followed. Mm-hmm. But what gets us excited is David's work is well out ahead of everyone else. And so we feel great. And I think here's where you get back to, once again, that academic to commercial collaboration.
Mhm.
David is the innovator. He's a as is Anna Maria. They're once in a century scientists in their field. And what we've been able to do, and I think this is where bringing in a team of experienced biotech scientists,
Mhm.
we've been able to take that academic work and translate it in a commercial setting, commercial development setting. For us, that was the big step forward looking at the monkey studies, non-human primates, which we presented earlier this year, right? It's, there's a saying in the field, in any field, particularly in this aging biology space, it's a great time to be a worm, yeast, or a mouse,
Right.
because we're seeing lots of great results. But we believe we're the first to take the big step forward in these optic neuropathies, particularly, and demonstrate utility in a higher level species that more resembles us, which is really important, particularly in optic neuropathies. The eye construct of a mouse is simple compared to the human eye. And what I mean by that, there is a barrier, what's called the inner limiting membrane in humans and in primates, other primates, that it can make it difficult to express your therapeutic at the target, to get your payload to the target cells. And so it was the big challenge and the big question to answer. Can we, one, demonstrate restoration of vision? Can we, two, rescue and reverse the status of these injured retinal ganglion cells?
Mm-hmm.
And so, the big thing was, can we get it across the inner limiting membrane? So the great news is the data actually exceeded our expectations, and that, one, we were able to show expression. We were able to get the payload to the target cells, the retinal ganglion cells, across the inner limiting membrane. Two, we were able to restore visual function,
mm-hmm.
as measured by a pattern ERG, it's called. And then three, we were able to preserve more healthy axons and restore injured axons. And so let me tell you, that's the highlight. Let me tell you how we did it. So there's a condition called non-arteritic anterior ischemic optic neuropathy. It's a mouthful. It's known as NION. It's a relatively rare disorder. It's age related. It affects us more as typically over the age of 50. A simple way to think of it is a stroke. It's an ischemic event. It's an acute event in the back of the eye. Basically, you wake up in the morning, it's painless, and you can't see out of one eye or a good portion of one eye, a quadrant of one eye. And it's a little scary. And right now, there's nothing to treat these patients. And so what we were able to do in the primates, a phenomenal model, and actually, not just the results here, but the model was demonstrated to be highly translatable. And for those who want to know why is that important, you really want confidence moving to the next stage, right? You want to know that your model's doing what it's intended to do. Yeah. So what we did in that with the primates, you introduced through a laser, you sort of mimic NION. And so we were able to measure that the results. We have data from humans and can see what happens to pattern ERG and visual function when they experience NION. We were able to demonstrate that when through the laser and we mimicked NION, we had similar changes in the pattern ERG and visual function. So we knew the model worked. Now it was a matter of introducing our therapy, and that's when we did that. That's when we were, one, able to see it get to the target, and two, restore vision, and three, rescue and preserve retinal ganglion cells. Phenomenal data. So from a data perspective, and then from a model perspective, we feel highly confident now marching toward the clinic, which is where we are now with our partial epigenetic reprogramming platform. And I think we can talk later, but I think I want to stop there because it really was a groundbreaking piece of work, even though it was in primates. It really changed. It changed, I think, the course of how we view partial epigenetic programming, taking it from sort of something that was, highly, I wouldn't say not skeptical, but high, very innovative, but it seemed far away, more hypothetical, and taking that to this is tangible and on the cusp of entering humans.
Yeah. No, it's amazing work, and the speed by which you've progressed it, as this core part of your portfolio is highly commendable. I was just wondering, I have to ask, while I have you, Jerry, but I haven't been out on the VC roadshow circuit in a while, but I have to, when I was, if I was another epigenetic reprogramming company and I came to your VC, you always get that question. Well, what do you think about like Biosciences? What do you think about this other company we looked at over here? I have to ask, there's this player now, Altos, which is out there with $3 billion, and or it's rumored even more. They tied up Shinya Yamanaka and Carlos Belmonte and sort of most of the players in cellular reprogramming. What's that like? Because I don't think anyone that's been on the VC circuit has ever run into a billion-dollar startup that they contend with, as opposed to other small startups. Any interesting anecdotes on that front while I have you?
No, so we take it as a compliment, right? We're the first. We believe we have the best science, and we're well out ahead of everyone else, right? We see the new entrants coming into the space, whether it's Altos or others, as really validation of the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And we have very different business models. So as I focus on what we are as Life Biosciences, and you gave the description of Altos so you understand how big and broad it is, we're laser focused. And I think that's a story we take to investors. We are focused initially on optic neuropathies with, as I mentioned earlier, this NION, and then also glaucoma. So we have a nice, when you think about it from an investor standpoint and a patient value standpoint, we have an acute event, smaller, almost orphan indication, both age related, and then glaucoma, a big, broad, one of the leading drivers of blindness in the world. Mm-hmm. And we think in advanced glaucoma, we have the ability to employ our OSK therapy for the betterment of not just slowing down. Our goal is to restore and prevent. Mm-hmm. That's the vision here. That's our goal, is to restore and prevent. And that's the difference from 30 years ago. So we're laser focused. And I think that frankly is quite appealing to investors. If you talk to most investors, they want to know what they're investing in.
Absolutely.
And they want a tangible line of sight and focus from a team. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the challenges probably Life faced early on with having 8 subsidiaries. So I think anyone who has a broader approach is going to face those similar questions. So we've aligned our company to be highly focused and give a tangible line of sight to value creation.
Excellent. Jerry, you were one of the authors of a really interesting paper that came out a couple of months ago in June in Nature Biotechnology, entitled "Defining a Longevity Biotechnology Company." And obviously, as we've been sitting here, you've been talking about your strategy and sort of how you're positioning Life Biosciences. In this paper, it sort of talks about the dual nature of the space that you're in the sense that yes, we want these interesting therapeutics that, whether they're for CNS or ophthalmic indications, that work at the sort of the core drivers and impact disease. But there's this other interest out there, and you mentioned health span, the ability to prove that we can not just delay one, but multiple diseases of aging potentially. And in this paper, we talk about sort of the sequential, like, hey, we'll develop our drug for X, and in a couple of years after we get approval and we're doing fine, we're going to look at Y and Z and everything else. Talk a little bit about this, what it was like being involved in putting together this paper. Obviously, a lot of luminaries on it with you. Say a few words about it, if you would.
Yeah, so I'm proud of the work of the Longevity Biotechnology Association. I think it was phenomenal to be invited in, to be a partner. And I have opinions having come from pharma and biotech, and many. What's great about the organization, you have folks that come from a lot of different avenues, whether it's academic, policy, serial entrepreneurs, right? It's fascinating. I think I'm proud of the organization, and where the organization is headed is really setting a high bar for the science. And setting sort of a standard, and in terms of defining what a longevity biotechnology company might look like. Mm-hmm. And the focus, as it is for us, we focus on health span, and that is our primary focus. By treating age-related disease, we can increase the number of healthy years that a patient lives and improve quality of life. And I think that's That's what you would have seen in that paper, and I think that's what the continued charge of the organization as we go forward. Now, turning to this concept, I think, Ira, that you were getting at of therapeutics versus the big picture of an aging claim, and how do we get there?
Yep.
Hard work,
Yep.
time, investment. Much like we saw with the statins. Originally, statins were indicated for the lowering of LDL cholesterol, just a number. Eventually, over time, I was part of that at Merck as we developed evidence on atherosclerosis and then events, and then eventually survival. The market grew, and the FDA, their acceptance and the broadening of the category grew. So I think there's some lessons to be learned there. We live in a very different environment today, though, Ira. So I think the approach is a step, to keep it very sort of general. It's a stepping stone approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we're doing today, focusing on optic neuropathies, right? Demonstrating that partial epigenetic reprogramming has utility for NION and glaucoma. We're already working on, and we have proof of concept working with David, and now inside of David Sinclair, and working inside Life Biosciences. We're already looking at other target organs and tissues. Mm-hmm. We're excited about the potential in neurodegeneration. We're excited about potential in things like hearing loss. We're excited about things in the lung, all age-related diseases, in particular organs and tissues that have a tremendous impact on the quality of life as we age. Mm-hmm. And so the stepping stone approach is allowing evidence, data, time, right, and technology change that will allow us to broaden out to where we'll move from certain tissues and organs throughout the body with the ultimate vision one day, Ira, aspirational today, but the aspiration will get us there is to have whole body or multi-organ rejuvenation with a single mm-hmm. therapeutic, right? Mm-hmm. That is the ultimate goal and ultimate long-term vision for us. We think it's possible, but there's stepping stones to get there. And I think how you're going to get there is through evidence. And yep. And I think anyone who states that coming out of the gates, we need to have an aging claim, that's just not going to happen. What I can say, Ira, is as recently as when I joined Life Bioscience, there was still a lot of talk at the conferences about that. We need to change. We need the regulatory bodies to change. Mm-hmm. We need to change. Right. We need to hold ourselves to a higher standard and generate the evidence. The burden is on us. And that's the approach we've taken. And I think that is in the long-term view holds the best promise for the sector. Mm-hmm. Now, in my heart and what I see in the data and where we're going, we will get there. There is tremendous promise here. This is no longer science fiction. It's, the old saying, it's science fact. I mean, we are making great progress. And you're seeing a number of companies. We're proud that we're one of them, but there are a number in the sector that are making tremendous progress and elevating the evidence. So whether it's in the partial epigenetic reprogramming, showing that we can rejuvenate cells to a more youthful state, and how that treats disease, or with our chaperone-mediated autophagy, showing that we can restore our cell, our internal recycling to that of a youthful state, and prevent and reverse disease. These all, as we generate this evidence, is all moving towards helping with a broader opportunity to generate things like an aging claim or a health span claim.
Outstanding. Yeah, and I appreciate you walking through that, Jerry, and especially with what's happening nowadays with GLP-1 and Ozempic and all those products, and sort of the cardiovascular to obesity to diabetes and some of the potential there, so the public sees. I think you're spot on with regard to the stepping stone concept.
But Ira, what's interesting about that, I'm glad you brought that up. So then there's a question about where in the world does this happen first?
Right.
And you look at our payer system with private pay, and then single payer doesn't really come into effect. It sort of comes into effect right at the age 65 and above. But when you look at other territories, and I'll give the UK as an example, the UK has recently announced that they will support the use of GLP-1s.
Yeah.
They're taking the long view of the potential benefits. And now patients, they'll have to go through diet and exercise, but they're taking a long-term holistic view of cost to system over lifetime. We're not quite there yet here in the United States, but over time, we may start to see that. And so where you may see this health span field advance faster are in territories outside of territories like the United States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. While we're on that topic, I mean, that sort of segues into something that, I'd love to get your perspective on. Clearly you're a longevity biotech company. You are instrumental in defining what a longevity biotechnology company is. But this space, whatever you want to call it, the gerosciences, aging, biotech, whatever, has a lot more stuff in it as we sit here in 2023 talking, right? It has also dietary supplements and medical tourism and influence-based biohacking and functional foods and a long list of stuff that sometimes gets all glommed together. And I just love your perspective on as you develop this theme of what a longevity biotechnology company is. How do you see sort of the broader picture evolving? I mean, some people say we got to have all this stuff together. It's all the same. And others say, no, maybe we should have just a defined Gero biotech segment. That's what our drug development folks is. And maybe this stuff should sit over here. Because I've been in companies where you had both pharma and consumer interest, and those investors clash during the board meetings. Say a few words about this. Love to get your perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different perspectives. And once again, getting back to the Longevity Biotechnology Association, it's one of the things that the organization has tackled is defining what is a true longevity biotech, and it gets back to that generating clinical evidence, right? And one of the challenges in the supplement world, and there are companies who are trying to develop evidence, but as we all know, the burden of proof is not as high. And there's a lot of avenues. And so I look at it this way. There's in any area that's of tremendous interest and has broad appeal, you're going to have things like the biohacking and the spas and the supplements. What I think, though, as I focus on what we're doing here, and I'll get back to what I said earlier, is that the more we're crystal clear about that fact that we're hardcore science, we're biotech, and we generate the evidence, and we really focus on clinical and regulatory pathways, I think it helps establish a separate sector within the space. And I think that's what you're seeing evolve in the last 2 or 3 years. It's typically the evolution of a sector, right? Mm-hmm. You have excitement, you have interest, and it brings a lot of different parties to the table, a lot of different entrepreneurs, a lot of different potential solutions. And what we've been very crystal clear about, we want there to be no confusion about what we are and what we are not. And I think that's part of the history of the company too, is shedding a lot of the other entities and investments, and just purely focusing on biotech. And then within that, being very clear about what we're bringing to the table in terms of cellular rejuvenation, whether it's through partial epigenetic reprogramming or through chaperone mediated autophagy. So I think it raises the burden, Ira, because the risk. And I've seen this at conferences. I was at a conference a year ago. 95% of the conference was amazing science. 5% was supplements or breathing oxygen. And there was an article written in one of the trades 2 months later. And the entire article was focusing on the supplements and the biohacking and right. So it's the risk. But I think it's a great lesson, Ira.
Yeah,
it's a great lesson. Yeah. That's easy fodder, right? That is the easy place to go. So I think it requires us, and this is what we talk about inside of our company, but even when I'm talking more broadly with my colleagues in the space, we have an opportunity, but also an obligation to ensure that we maintain discipline in how we describe ourselves and in how we invest our dollars. Yeah. Because that is the easy, from a media perspective, from a general public perspective, it's always going to revert back to that arena.
Yeah, clear, disciplined. Yeah, I love it. No, it's spot on. Jerry, what what else is coming? I mean, I noticed all 2023 you were on a lot of the conference circuit talking about what's going on at Life Biosciences. What's happening? Well, we're getting near the end of the year now, but anything else coming up that we should know about per the company, per you, conferences that we can run into you at, meet you, other talks you're going to be giving as we get into 2024, either on the science side, and the investor conference side. Anything else I missed? Please enlighten
No,
us.
we'll be involved in both scientific conferences related to ophthalmology and CNS. In addition to that, there are a number, I think, of key health span conferences. I'll be in Saudi Arabia in a couple of weeks. There's the inaugural Health Evolution Summit. That'll be a fantastic program. There will be upwards of 1,500 investors, companies, academics, all coming together. I'm excited to have been asked to serve on a panel there.
Nice.
So that will be fantastic. And then from an operational perspective, for partial epigenetic reprogramming, on the heels of the data in the non-human primates, we have moved into manufacturing for GLP and for IND enabling and also for our phase 1. So we're moving forward with additional studies. Are in prepping for phase 1. We expect to be in the clinic in 2025 for partial epigenetic reprogramming, looking at both NION and glaucoma. So it'll be an exciting day. So we're in an operational mode and execution mode right now. We have capital for the time being, and so we're able to do that. And then for our chaperone-mediated autophagy program, we've employed a high throughput screen, and we're making tremendous progress from a drug discovery standpoint. And if all goes well, we could identify a lead, sometime late 24, early 25 for that program. So that continues to move forward as well. So there's times in your evolution as a company where it's it's a focus and a operational execution timeframe, and that's where we are now, right? We have the capital, and we're putting it to good work in an efficient manner.
It's awesome to see. I mean, it's just again, this is another piece of your story that is clearly successful, and it's gonna be fun to I mentioned when we were first chatting. I followed you the last couple of years. It's going to be interesting to see you continue to evolve this platform and into the clinic. Really excited for you. Again, for everybody who's going to be listening to this particular episode of our show across the various podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been listening to Jerry McLaughlin, Chief Executive Officer and board member at Life Biosciences, doing really amazing things to develop these novel therapeutics to prevent, treat, and ultimately reverse multiple different aging-related conditions. Jerry, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come talk to us for a little while about what you're up to, the things you're doing. Obviously, thank you for doing them. And as we like to say here on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for so many people out there via the work you do. Really a great story, and wishing you the best with it.
Oh, thank you, Ira. It was an honor to be part of your show.
Great having you.